Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I trust everyone is safe and well. Welcome to this week's Open Classroom webinar, the 50th in this series which we began at the beginning of our local lockdown. In today's webinar, we'll be continuing with the introduction of the new functionality included in the next version of Civil Designer, version 8.4, which will be released on Monday, the 3rd of August. As per our previous webinars, today we welcome back Cameron Boyle, Andrew Cole, and Christopher Smith, all the regulars, who will be covering the modules listed on your screens right now, starting with Cameron today. To all our first-time webinar attendees, which once again makes up a rather large number, please note that all our past webinars, 49 of them, can be found on civildesigner.com on the FAQ page, which is listed under the Services pull-down menu. During the 3 presentations today, please feel free to use the text chat service on the GoToWebinar app to ask us any questions you may have during the various presentations. So, good afternoon, Cameron, and please take it away.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome everybody to the road session of today's webinar. I'm excited to show you the powerful point control functionality. Point control is a point that is indicated in the cross-section of your template. You are then able to modify the point horizontally or vertically, targeting a CAD entity or an existing road string. This then allows you the location of the cross-sectional points or components to be moved as per your rules specified. Using the point control, I'm going to show you how you could gradually go and make changes to your sidewalk. I'll also include components and different cut and fill conditions. Let's exit the render view and exit the project. I'm going to start off at the road templates. This is where you go and specify your point control. As an example, if I go and select right compulsory, I have the option to go and edit an edge or component. Selecting the component, you'll see there's an additional option here for point control name. Let's call it right control point number 1. Click on the green tick and you'll see now you've got this additional text. Escaping that and selecting the left-hand side compulsory. I'm then going to add an edge and rename this as the left compulsory point 1. In addition to that edge, you may also go and use your components. I've already got components that I'm working with, so I'm going to go and select the template option. Go and select which component I want. Right-click and add to template. With the compulsory information out of the way, I'm going to go and select left cut. Go and select a cut footpath and add it to the template. In addition to that, you can still go and add additional edges. I'm then going to put in a 100mm border on my footpath and make it level. Give an additional name, let's call it left footpath number 1. Doing the same to the left fill condition. Selecting my component, and if you missed it last week, you are able to go and apply textures to your components. There's all 40 of them. I'm then going to use the cobblestone. Apply it to the template and go and add the additional 100 mils to the edge. I'm giving it the same name, so irrespective of whether it's in cut or fill, I've got the same code for my point control. Pressing escape. So looking at what we've added the left compulsory point with the V-drain inclusive, and then looking at the left cut and the left fill. I'm going to go and save this as another template. And apply that template to my design. Now that control point can be targeted by your CAD entities or by a road string. In this example, I'm going to use the CAD entities, so I'm going to go and turn on the appropriate CAD layer. And this is a polyline that I've drawn in, looking at the properties. Let's use the actual function. Go to alignment, regression, and in 8.4 you'll find that there's a point controls option. As mentioned, you have the option of selecting a CAD entity, or in a case where you're selecting a road strings, if you were to go and select an entity of your road string, click on it, you could then go and specify which string you want to extract the information from. Canceling that, and then looking at the actual function. The first point on the left that we put in was left compulsory point number 1. I want to apply it to a specific template. You could, for instance, apply it to all your templates. You have the option of switching it on and off, so you can run different scenarios to see what the result would be. Just to the right of that, looking at the mode, you can specify you want to pick up just the horizontal or just the vertical information, or in this case, both. The height options, if I go and right-click from entities, you can go and specify which height point control to use. Looking at the heighting options, you could go and specify a specific height, and in that case, everything will have the same elevation. From entities, which I'll use in this example, at a later stage, I'll show you how you can interpolate the heights from a DTM. Or you have the option to retain a grade. And in that case, it uses the grade that you specified in your template. Now, with some of these options, you can see that you have the ability to go and add a constant height. Select the target. If I were to go and right-click on this arrow, as I move my cursor, you'll see that a target is highlighted. In this case, we're using the polyline. So I click on the polyline, and Civil Designer will automatically pick up the chainage range. You have the option to specify your own chainage, or you could leave them as is. Put in a description. Click on OK, and recalculate your road. You can either go to Alignment, Road Recalculate, or you'd go and select your Recalculate icon. Civil Designer's already coordinated the horizontal alignment. We will now go and do the rest. There it is, done for us. If you want to see the result, you can go and right-click and select Render View, and then change in my zoom view. The edge of my compulsory point is where the black surface ends. Then we've gone and specified the V-drain. We've put in the footpath. At this stage, the V-drain is flowing downhill towards the junction or intersection. I'm going to go and change that. Pressing Escape. As an example, if I want this point where my cursor is now to be the lowest point, I can go and make changes accordingly. Now the emphasis here is that your V-drain doesn't have to follow the vertical alignment of your road. You can go and specify how you would like the V-drain to react independently of your road. Selecting the polyline again, I'm going to go and right-click and select Insert Vertex. Specify where you want the vertex to be, and then right-click and quit. If I go to my properties, I can view the vertex elevations, and making that the lowest point, I'm then going to specify a Z code. Changing vertex number 4 and adjusting the elevation accordingly. Now that I've made a change, I can then simply go to area volume and apply template, and the changes would be updated. You could go and turn on your road contours and slope shading. In this case, I'm just going to view it in 3D. So looking at the bus lay-by, you can see that is the lowest point over there. Looking at it from another perspective, you can see here we've got the lowest point. If you want to view the V-drain in a cross-sectional format, we then go to Section, Graphical Edit, go and select a point. Looking at the position or the height of my V-drain, if I press page down, you can see the V-drain elevation drop. That being the lowest point, and then moving back up. In this example, I just used a polyline, but you can also go and use a spline. Let's use that as an example. Going to my CAD mode, selecting Draw Spline. It may be that you want to go and put in your own customized embankment. So I want to go and put in my toe point over here. And at a later stage, I'll show you that if you do go and make changes to these CAD entities, the point control would then dynamically update. Going back to the point control function, selecting regression, point controls. I'm then going to change the point control rules. I'm still working with my first code, changing the mode this time to horizontal. If I do specify a horizontal mode, it's not necessary to define my height options. Even if I do select retain grade here, this information would be ignored. Click on OK. The target has already been selected. Then go and select the left footpath. Specify which template you want to apply this to. I'm going to switch it on. In this case, again, I'm selecting the both mode. From the entities, I'm then going right-click and go and specify interpolate from a DTM surface. In this case, the merge ground, and using a search distance. With the interpolate from DTM surface option, you also have the option to go and apply height constant. Click on OK, and then go and specify which target to use. I right-click on the arrow, moving my cursor, looking at the different options. I select the spline, and again you could go and specify your own specific chainage range or keep them as specified. Give it a name and click on OK. Going to recalculate. If I again go and right click and render view, we'd be able to see the results. Just looking at what we've done here, we've gone and put in our customized embankment, and there's the 100 mil step that I went and specified. If I do make changes to my CAD lines, whether it's the polyline or the spline, I bring back the point control dialog and then recalculate. Also worthwhile mentioning is if I go and delete an applicable CAD line, if I go back to the function, you'll see that the target cell color has changed. That's all the time we have for today. See you next week, where I'll go into more detail with the Stockdale roundabout enhancements. Back to you, Charles.
Thank you, Cameron. That was great. We are now going to be handing over to Chris, who will be continuing with the new 8.4 functionality included in the sewer and storm modules. Chris, please take it away.
Thanks, Charles, and welcome everybody to this webinar. Today we're going to be looking at the new tools and functionality available to you in the sewer and stormwater module. Let's go have a look at these new tools. Before we start, I always like to make sure the terrain is set up to best represent what's happening on site. So I like to go to the display settings and I go to the slope shading. I switch on the slope shading, I switch off the colors, but I'll turn the arrows on. I'll make it 2 millimeters in height and we can press OK. You can now see which way the ground is falling. I can then go back to the display settings. I can go to the height shading, switch on the height shading. You can click on auto scale and color ramp. I like the low lying areas to be in blue and the high lying areas to be red. Now I've got an idea. There seems to be a valley running along here with 2 high points. Now let's have a look at these new tools. If I go to sewer mode and I go to edit, default settings, and we go to layout, you'll remember the road reserve and the mid-block offsets from previous versions. We now have the ability to enable link divisions and space manholes apart, which I'll show you in application in a moment. This is where you would come and disable it should you prefer the older way of working. And I'll go through to graphical add. Here you can see the max length of 80 meters has come through from the previous pop-up, but here is a new item which is offset. This is not to do with mid-blocks or road reserve. It is any offset from any CAD line. I'll make that also 2 meters and accept that. We'll put in a sewer line along this route here, and I'll right click and use one of the new options, which is the draw links parallel to CAD lines. You may remember the add mid-block and add node in road reserve from previous versions. I'll choose the draw links parallel and I'll zoom in over here. I'm going to be offset from this boundary and it asks us for the first node, so I'll call this. So even though I clicked over here, it offset and drew in this node along this CAD line. I'll do the next one and go along this route. Now you saw there was the 80 meter separate. This CAD line will probably be longer than 80 meters, so let's go and offset from there. And there it's inserted an extra manhole because this pipe is longer than 80 meters and it's found the equidistant location for that. Now when it comes to these areas here where you want to offset, you may choose to use the parallel or you may choose to use the mid-block. That's up to you. I wouldn't continue because it will try and find an intersecting point. The best is to press escape. You can then press spacebar and now it is your choice if you want to do a mid-block or a parallel. That is up to you. The benefits of doing a parallel is you can just select there and it will find the offset and put both manholes in for you. And then at this location, you might want to rather press escape, press spacebar again for graphical add, and right click, and then over here I'll choose road reserve. This gives me a little bit more control where I want the manholes. Perhaps you wouldn't want the manhole to be outside the road, you'd want it to be a little bit more in. So instead of being opposite to this corner, I'd maybe want to be a little bit inside. So I'll select over here, give it its name, and you see it is found where the offset from that is, and I'd want to be a little bit inside. And it has found the offset. I can close that now and press escape. And now it's simply joining the dots for these lines. I'll go graphically connect node, and I'll just trace this route. I press escape and space bar again. And there we go. For the next section, I'd like to know what my node names and link names are. So I'll go through to display settings. I'll go to nodes, put the name, and links, and place the name. I'd like to connect through here, so let's just select this link and move this text over here. Great. Let's go back to graphical add, and I'm going to right click and choose the parallel again. I'll go along this route. I now want to go along this route here, but this will be a mid block, so I'll change this to 1 meter and press the green tick. I'll then click just south of this line. It'll want to connect to this link, and I'll say yes. It'll then trim that manhole back. Let's just move this again. Let's move it over here. And we can go along this route over here. So let's press spacebar, change that back to 2 meters, draw parallel, and over here I want to connect to this link but not to this node, as I do not want to encroach on this property boundary, as there may be a fence in the future. It'll ask me if I want to connect to that node, number 14, I'll say no. And then it'll ask me if I want to insert a node along this route, and I'll say yes. So there it's inserted 2 nodes, and what we can now do is delete the node that's closest to the boundary. This link will now automatically link up to the next downstream node. You can just move these. I'm just going to move this text out of the way so we can see. So here you can see I rather move the pipeline a little bit further away from the boundary than having this one closer to the boundary. Great, I'd now like to look at the long section features that have been added to the software. Here you can see we've still got this manhole over here, which was for the equidistant spacing. We can probably remove that manhole. So let's go and have a look. We first need to run the analysis. So let's go and say analyze network. We'll need to renumber the branches and recalculate the link lengths. We can close that. We can now select this branch and look at the long section. Immediately you'll see that incoming links into your branch will be hatched. You can also go to the display settings and tick for the show incoming link text. You may notice some new tools in the side panel. Along with the move vertical from previous versions, we now have the move horizontal. The move horizontal will only be allowed when the pipes are co-linear. Here you'll notice that I will not be able to move this pipe because there's a change of grade. And these ones I will not be able to move because there is a horizontal change. So if we click on the tracker, you'll notice that there's a horizontal change at these nodes. One way to resolve this is to either delete this manhole and place even spaces, or to change the grade. So you could go and change the grade between these 2 manholes, press save, and then you would be allowed to move the manhole along the route. As you move the manhole and you press save, it will update. We can also choose to delete this manhole and place manholes at even spaces. Before we place the manholes at even spaces, I always say that you should rather select the node first of the downstream, then choose to select the multiple nodes at even spaces, choose the next one upstream, choose your spacing apart, I'll say 30 meters, and the next node name available is 22, and there we've got our even spaces along that route. We can then say save, and the nodes have been added. We can say close. One last thing before we wrap up, I just want to show you the benefits of this even spacing of manholes when it comes to bulk lines. If we go to the graphical add and we set this to 0, the old method of putting the manholes will come into play, where you'd place a manhole. However, with the new method, if I press escape and spacebar and we set the manhole spacing, immediately you'll see your equidistant spacing of the manholes. So this can really benefit you in saving you time for when you're doing your bulk lines. That's about it for today. I hope these new tools will save you a lot of time, and thank you for joining us today. Back to you, Charles.
Awesome, Chris. Thank you. That was great. We're now going to be heading over to Andrew, who will be introducing new functionality included in the Survey and Terrain and Design Center modules. Andrew, please take it away.
Good day. In my segment of today's webinar, I'll be looking at some general Civil Designer 8.4 enhancements, which for the most part are still related to the Survey and Terrain module. The first item I want to look at is the shading, that different surface catfill shading. We've added a key into the plotting routine. So when you plot, you can actually see the different height bands for the different shading, and you'll be able to see the catfill areas. So the different shading, if you watched last week, we've added 2 new features. You can automatically generate catfill shading between 2 surfaces or between your terrain strings or road strings and a base surface. And then we've got the traditional one at the bottom, which is the one I'm just going to use for this particular exercise. You got your pens for the fill area and the cut area. The negative values would generally be your cut area, where you subtracting material. Positive is where you adding material. So it's just a matter of switching that different shading, the catfill shading, on in the display settings with the new 8.4 functionality. You can see the cut and fill areas. So I'm just going to run my plot routine now with the standard plan sheet file from the knowledge base software folder. So it's the standard plan sheet. Just remember, we update these sheet files in the knowledge base software folder. So save your sheet files elsewhere if you don't want them to be overwritten. Okay, so just my 1:200 scale. I could probably just toggle that one off and add a new plot region so that I can fit in that new different shading key up top in the right hand corner. Okay, so just right click, quit, and next. So if all your tables are switched on, all the lists to be plotted, you can use that clear all button. It's been added fairly recently, and I'm switching on the different shading key. So that's your catfill shading key. Okay, and then you can see the fill and the cut area, and then the different shading key up top here in the right hand corner. So you can clearly see the cut and the fill areas. If you want to see a more detailed gradient shading, then we can just go regenerate the key again in the display settings. I'm just going to go back to that different shading setting. And this time I'm going to use the different shading between two surfaces. So one of those new automated methods in 8.4. So you select your ground and design surface and the pens that you'd like to use for the fill and your cut. I'm just going to use a reddy brown color for the cut shading and the blue for the fill, and then just click on the generate button. So then the program automatically generates those shading colors. I've also selected to use the gradient colors, so we can see the gradient shading, the cut fill shading. Just running the plot routine again with those same settings and the different shading key activated. And there we can see the nice gradient shading for the full area and the cut area, and then your shading key with the different bands, the depth of cut and full bands in that different shading key. So that's quite a nice new function that's been added in 8.4, the automated different shading, and now we've also got the different shading key that's been added. Okay, so I'm moving on to the next item in my webinar today. So I'm just going to switch off that different shading. Just uncheck it in the display settings. And the next item I want to look at is going to be the plotting of the tables for your platform. So in this case, I want to show there are some enhancements that have been made to the normal coordinate list. For example, when you're plotting your platform setting out data. So I've just switched on the point names for this platform of mine. I'm just going to run the plot routine. So plot generate again with the plan sheet file. So I can include that coordinate listing, those same settings. I'm switching off the different shading key and activating that survey list, the coordinate list. And I just want to apply the filter. So I only want to display the points on that platform surface when I plot the list. So that filter applies to the listing. So generally you wouldn't be plotting this many points. You just ideally plot the key points around your platform. But I just want to show you with this particular exercise the new ability we've added to truncate your plan lists to a specified number of rows. So I'm just going to go to the sheet file editor and I'm going to load the plan sheet file. So file, load sheet file, just the standard plan sheet file. And I'm just going to show you that new setting. So it'll be in settings, sheet file settings, and we're looking at the plan lists, and in fact it would be the coordinate list, the standard coordinate listing for a terrain surface. So it's this new maximum number of rows item at the bottom. So you can specify the number of rows in your listing, the maximum number of rows. So I'm just going to set it to 50 and then just save those changes to the plan sheet file. And then we can go back to the project with the list of coordinates and plot, force dynamic generate. So that just incorporates the changes I've just made to my plan sheet file. And you can see that table, the coordinate table has been limited to 50 items per column. So just additional tables added until we have all the points listed. I'm just going to go to my display settings and activate the shading on my platform surface just to brighten the plot up a little bit. And that looks pretty neat with the table reduced to 50 items per column. Okay, then I'm just going to go back to my sheet file editor, back to that plan sheet file. And we've been looking at the coordinate listing, so just your normal DTM surface points that you want to list from any surface. So that was the coordinate list that we've been looking at. And we've added in 8.4, we've added this strings coordinate list. So you no longer have to translate your platform strings to a DTM surface to list it. You now have the option to create a table directly from the actual string platform. So looking at the lists or the labels for the coordinate list and the string listing in the sheet file settings, you'll see they're very similar. It's just the strings have a chainage item added to them. Okay, so the column widths and the headings very similar, but the strings listing has got the chainages added to them. So remember, the strings chainage is from the origin point as it was defined your terrain string. Okay, so I'm just going to run a plot. I could plot a strings table for this multiple platforms project, but I'll use a slightly simpler one just as an example. So yeah, I've got 3 strings platforms that are designed in a previous webinar. Just going to run the plot routine with the standard plan sheet file. I've already got a defined plot region and I've activated the new strings listing. Okay, and there you can see the 3 platforms, string platforms, and the tables. So there we have our string platform point names, the coordinates, as well as the chainages for all 3 of those string platforms. Okay, so you can also truncate those lists. We've also given you that option in the sheet file. So I'm just going back to my plan sheet file to that strings coordinate list. I'm just selecting one of the items that shortcut to get into the sheet file settings, and we're looking at the strings listing. So once again, you have got a maximum number of rows that you could set to reduce the length of your tables. And we have introduced the maximum number of rows in most of the standard plan tables. Okay, and then just to finish off today, I want to show you a new setting which is applicable in the render view. So we've added a maximize render view option. So if you have your properties bar, and I'm just opening mine up, and the output bar open, if you go into the render view, just right click render view, we can see the output bar and the properties bar would generally have stayed open, but in the render settings now we've added an option to maximize the render view. So you just have to relaunch it to have it take effect. So it's going to hide the properties and output bar. Okay, so if I relaunch the render view, sorry, I'm just going to quit out of it first. And if I right click and relaunch the render view, you can see the output bar and the properties bar have automatically been hidden. So as the render view setting implies, it maximizes your view of your site. So just giving you a nice uninterrupted view. And that's me for today. Until next time, cheers.
Thank you, Andrew, Chris, and Cameron, for your classes today. And thank you very, very much to all of you who attended today. Please remember that if you would like any further information with regards to Civil Designer, please use the email address listed on your screens right now. As I stated earlier, all our past lockdown webinars, 50 of them now, can be found on our website on the FAQ page, which is found under the Services pull-down menu. Once again, thank you very much for your time today. See you all next week, Thursday, at the same time and same place, using the same link for the third of our 3 pre-launch Civil Designer version 8.4 webinars. Remembering the launch date for this version will be Monday, the 3rd of August. Have a great afternoon, weekend, and goodbye for now.